You're a lighthouse. So the longing to be able to hear from God and talk to God as a friend has been in my life as long as I can remember. The ability to actually hear from Him and talk to Him like I wanted to, not so much. So, for those of you who don't know me, I'm McCove Johnson, and I work with Christian women who have been impacted by childhood emotional neglect. And part of what I do is teaching them to hear the voice of God, like I have learned to hear the voice of God and to walk with Him as a friend, like I feel like He talks about in Scripture with Moses and David. And of course, Jesus said, I don't call you servants, I call you friends. And so, and for December, I just felt like the Lord just wanted me to kind of share my story, kind of share my roots, as people have been asking me, like, well, why did you start doing this? How did you become a coach? And I just felt like some people seem to have a concise story of, like, right here, this is when I knew and this is what I did. And I don't have that. So I'm like, well, I'm just going to take time to kind of tell the significant pieces of the story, and maybe that'll bring me some clarity. But so that desire to, like, talk to God as a friend has just been there as long as I can remember. And but not knowing how, and not knowing anyone in my life who knew how either. And then I don't know, probably in junior high and high school, I started getting exposed to some people who seemed to have that kind of relationship, but it wasn't in a way that I knew how to reach out to them, or that, like, I felt like I could learn. But at least it fed that fire that, like, it's possible that you can talk to God like a friend. And then when I had my own kids, like wanting that for them and not knowing how to do that. And we had a speaker come to our church who talked about what he called soaking. And he used the analogy of, like, if you've got a pan that you made lasagna in, and, like, the sauce and the cheese and the grease and everything is, like, baked on there. You can scrub. Please don't. You can scrub and scrub and scrub and get that pan clean. Or you can fill it with water and a little soap, and you can let it soak overnight. Please stop. We'll have to figure out a way to make your chair quieter. It's too loud. So, and he used that as a spiritual analogy. Like, we can see the things that aren't right in our life, and we can work and work and work and work to change our character, to show up differently. Or we can spend time in God's presence soaking. And, it talks about that in His presence is fullness of joy, and just letting Him love you, which of course is a whole nother thing of learning to actually, like, what the heck does that mean, and how do I do that? But I started trying, and I wanted my kids to know, so I had them try right along with me. Excuse me. And I share more of that journey in Transformational Quiet Times, but, like, we practiced and we tried different things, and I got frustrated, and some days wondered if they were just making things up, and other days very encouraged by what they had to say, and some of the things that they saw and heard, I still refer back to this day. So I know they were from the Lord. And, like, in my own journey, I would get frustrated because I just heard a song or heard a Bible verse or something, but He used what I knew. The Lord used what I already knew to teach me more, to get me familiar with His voice. And where the Lighthouse comes in is several years into this journey. I was at a women's event, and I think we were supposed to ask the Lord for a picture or a word or something. I'm not exactly sure at the moment, but I clearly heard Him say, "You're a lighthouse." And I'm like, "No, I'm not." And He's like, "Yeah, you're a lighthouse," because, and, like, bringing to mind, I had written my first book, which is Christmas is About Jesus. And I'm like, yeah, so, like, that's a light I'm shining out there. And, you know, like lighthouses are strong. And so I'm like, okay, I'm a lighthouse. And then he said, lighthouses have needs. And still on that journey to learn I have needs, and that's okay. Um, just keep going. I feel like I'm jumping around, but I'm going to go with, because realizing like, oh, it was all those years ago that he's like, yeah, you have needs. And I was like, oh. And so I've been learning to have needs and to have needs met. And then I've just been in this last season in a whole new place of like, I have needs and it's okay to have them met. And oftentimes when we do that, it's like, oh, how can I be at this place again? I thought I dealt with this already. And oh, and so a picture he gave me years ago is a spiral staircase. Because we can feel like we're going around the track and we're just stuck in this same rut and we're just doing the same thing over and over again. And he showed me it's more like a spiral staircase. Like we come back around to the point where we have the same view and we can see the same thing, but we're seeing it from an entirely different point of view. We're seeing it as an entirely different person. And so I don't know, kind of a bunny trail there, but maybe some of you needed that. It's a spiral staircase. You're not stuck in a rut if you're doing some work. If you're partnering with him, things have changed. And there's now, just like for me with looking at needs, if he had shown me the level of my neediness that I saw recently, if he had shown that to me years ago, I wouldn't have been able to handle it. And so it's just that grace of, you can deal with this, you can deal with this. So anyway, then being a lighthouse, like, just became a part of my relationship with him, where I would be like, okay, what does it look like for a lighthouse to have needs? If I'm a lighthouse, what does that look like? Well, you know, the paint needs to be taken care of. The light in an old lighthouse, like the oil needed to be filled, the mirrors needed to be cleaned. And, you know, I'm sure there's maintenance on new lighthouses. They need maintenance, they need things. And being strong in hard situations, in hard relationships, be like, okay, I'm a lighthouse. What does that look like? How do I hold on to this? And then, I don't know, I forgot, I didn't make notes. So just trying to kind of condense my story and pick the highlights about hearing God's voice and being a lighthouse. And I just continued to journey in that, bringing that into my women's ministry, trying to encourage my kids to develop that for themselves. And was working with children's ministry at church for some years in there too. And then one day the Lord gave me the idea of creating a course, and to create a course on how to learn, because people would ask me like, how do you learn to hear God's voice? How did you do this? And I'm like, well, I could create a course on that. And so I did, and I was definitely scared and unsure, but I knew that's what God was telling me to do, so I did. And then when I got the course done, I'm like, oh, but what I really want to do is coach the people that are going through this and help them sort through all those things that I was sorting through on my own of, is this me? Is this God? Is it the enemy? What do I do with this? How do I know, you know, these emotions and all these things? And like, that's what I really want to do. Like, I want to coach there. So that's how he got me started in coaching. And then just has been that refining process of who exactly am I supposed to be working with. And I know he's not done yet, but childhood emotional neglect is a big piece because it's a big piece of my story. And I think I talked about that last week. I think I talked about it a lot. But just the messages and the things that I struggled with, like, that's where they came from in large part. So I know that's where he wants me working and doing it in conjunction with him, which I'll talk about more. The last week of December, I think, is when I have scheduled to talk more about like, what does that look like for what he's brought me through and how I bring that into my coaching. And having a coach, like I love the coaching model because unlike maybe a counselor or a consultant, or a therapist, because I'm not doing therapy and not counseling, is I don't need to fix anything. I just need to help you sort through and put your pieces together. Like I give a safe place for you to kind of spill everything out, and the Holy Spirit and you and I can put it back together. And it's not me putting it back together. It's going, oh, you threw all these pieces out. And I think, what if you took that piece and stuck it with that piece? It seems like maybe this piece and this piece connect. And just to help you see those things for yourself, and you can be like, no. Okay. Well, what about this one and this one? Or you might be like, oh, now that I threw all that out there in front of you, like I see, like it connects, and then can help you. Now that you see what you see, what do you do next? What steps can you take to move towards what God's calling you to, whether that is healing, whether that's establishing your identity, whether that's just so many things that he could be calling and inviting you into. So I feel like I rambled all over, but just piece of my story of longing to hear God's voice and learning to hear his voice. And it's part of my everyday life. It's a huge part of my coaching. And yes, bless you. Merry Christmas as you're getting ready and getting closer. Have a blessed week.